Here's to good friends, the ones we hold dear, the ones who will tell us what we need to hear, the ones who love us, right or wrong, and to all those good friends that give you this song.
Yes, friends, it's time for The Last Walk, Remember When, with your host, Ron Baumbach. Today we're going to be talking about old stuff, old stuff, old stuff.
Hey, that's my part.
Greetings, good friends, and welcome back to The Last Walk, Remember When, with your host, Ron Baumbach. And we're going back in time to a different time, back when you were a child. So get together, get your cold, refreshing chocolate egg cream, a really nice pair of Drake's Cake snowballs. I like the pink ones, personally. And turn on your lava lamp, because we're going back in time. The Last Walk, Remember When, is back.
Oh, I've been so lucky and I've been so blessed. In spite of my failings, I've found success. For I've known love and I've known good times, and I have known friendship and written some rhymes.
So, where were you when the lights went out? Remember when? It was a Tuesday, November 9th, 1965. My buddy Don Becker and I were doing our best to be erstwhile citizens of the world and helping our school, St. Mary's High School in Manhasset, New York, with their annual canned food drive. So we decided to walk around my neighborhood, door to door, collecting canned food to help the poor people. One by one, we knocked on doors and got our can of peas or cream spinach, whatever it might be, or mainly corn, and gathered them, put them in our bag. Suddenly, as we're walking, it got dark. It got very, very dark. We looked at each other and said, "What happened? Hey, Don, did you trip over that wire?" "No, Ron, did you do it? You must have fallen over something." "No, you pulled the plug." "Who pulled the plug?" "Someone pulled the plug." "What happened here?" It was pitch black. November 9th, 1965. We went back to my house, tried to go back home. It was really, really dark. Everything was no TV on, no lights on in the house, nothing on. Mom was sitting around, Dad sitting around, my sister doing homework, trying to do homework, and we were trying to figure out what happened. Lucky for us, we had my trusty red transistor radio, and we could turn that baby on and find out what in the world happened. So we got Don back home. We settled in for an interesting evening of gathering around the little radio, listening to life like it was for my parents way back when in the 40s. Oddly enough, the cause of this incredible mess was one thing. Supposedly human error. Some guy up in Ontario, Canada, supposedly flipped some switch and everything went off. Now, back in our day, we used to go down to a fuse box, not the circuit breaker box, but the fuse box. If you didn't have a fuse, you put a nickel in, which wasn't too smart, but this thing was way too big for a nickel. A quarter wouldn't fit. The whole thing went out. The guy blew it big time. Now, we had all kind of concerns about this blackout. The Vietnam War was going on, and no one knew if possibly that was some kind of attack from the Viet Cong on American soil. We were all concerned of what it could have been. Obviously, it was not the case. Some 12 years later, it happened again. In 1977, the lights went out. I remember being at work that day, and all of a sudden, I was going home from work, and it was black. You couldn't see anything at all. And they came back later on, I think in the evening. And then again, on August the 14th, in 2003, it happened one more time. It was a huge, huge blackout on the Northeast. Where were you on those three blackouts? 1965, 1977, and 2003. Where were you when the lights went out? 30 million people were affected by this thing. I think it was like 7 states. It was an incredible, a crazy experience to live through. Remember where you were that day? What were you doing? If you were on the West Coast, you probably figured those people on the East Coast always had the lights gone out. If you're in the East Coast, you're thinking, what's happening here? Who turned off the lights? There were stories about what happened and what transpired then. The most incredible thing in my mind was, and people always talk about New Yorkers being different. New Yorkers are different because we're really good people. Interesting fact, looting during that blackout, and it lasted until 7 a.m. the next day. Records show there was only 5 cases of looting for that period. It was the lowest number of looting cases in the history of records in New York City. So it just proves the fact that we New Yorkers, we're good people, babe. We're good people. So the other thing was, there was a movie about the incident starring Doris Day called Where Were You When the Lights Went Out? Came out a couple of years later. It was also not true that the birth rate increased 9 months later. There was a famous myth that all of a sudden there was a lot more babies born. But somebody about 15, 20 years later did an analysis of that, and there was no increase in the number of births. There was also a mention of it in a very, very famous movie called Rosemary's Baby, starring Mia Farrow. Mia Farrow, you may recall, was married to Frank Sinatra, then she went over to Woody Allen. Anyway, where were you when the lights went out, and what did you do? The really odd thing about that was there was no cell phones, no cell phone service, and no cell phones to make a call. So you were really stuck in an abysmal, twisted center of your mind. A couple of years later, I'm out with my friend Ken, about maybe 6 years later. We're cruising the neighborhood late at night. We had this old black Ma Bell landline phone that was in my house for years, that my mom had when she finally got a princess phone. So we took this phone, put it between us in the car, his little Volkswagen, and we thought we'd have some fun. We pulled up next to, it was a Friday evening, we were out there cruising for babes, wherever it might be. It was probably 1970, 71. We're driving along, we stop at a light, there's some girls next to us, and Ken has a phone in his hand, he rolls the window down. Now back then you couldn't push a button to roll the window down, you had to actually roll the window down, if you know what I mean. It was a totally different way of driving a car. So he rolls his window down, takes the phone receiver, yells over to the girl next to him, and he yells over and says, "Hey, we got a call, and it's for you."
It took me long years to write this short song. I tried and I tried, but kept getting it wrong. I thought about my life and what had gone right, and I realized the song was right here in plain sight. Here's to good friends, the ones we hold dear, the ones who will tell us what we need to hear, the ones who love us, right or wrong, and to all those good friends who give you this song.
The girl looked at him like he had 3 heads and sped off. We thought we were hilarious. We thought we were ahead of the curve. Nobody had phones back then. Then we figured it was the opening of Pathmark, their 24-hour store. Back then the stores were closing at 9 p.m. at night, or they would open at 7 in the morning, and the food stores would not be open all night long. So it was a big, big thing in our area in Garden City, Long Island, where this Pathmark was announcing grand opening, 24-hour store, come shop anytime, day and night. So at 2 in the morning, on our way back from some pub and on our way to Phil's Diner on Hillside Avenue in Wilson Park, we figured we'd have some fun. We'd go into the Pathmark and we would get a roll of toilet paper. We'd run in there thinking there'd be nobody in the store, just the clerks, and we would run in there and think it'd be a hilarious joke to get a roll of toilet paper. So we run in the store, and what do we see? It was full. It was packed. And everyone was buying, you name it, at 1:32, 2:30 in the morning. Place was filled to capacity. We didn't buy the toilet paper. And luckily, we didn't need it either.
Life is too short, we get only one turn. With luck we find beauty, but we sometimes get burned. But if you've had a true friend, or perhaps a love, you've experienced the peace of heaven above.
Remember the days of buying gasoline when it cost 29.9 cents a gallon? Or I remember a Gulftane was once 19.9 cents a gallon. I could drive home from Marist College of Poughkeepsie, New York, 94 miles, and put in $5 of gas. I'd be home and have enough to go back again. It was great. And that car was a gas guzzler. My 1961 Rambler Herbie was a tank, and this thing drank gas, but it moved smooth. When you pulled into a gas station, especially the one around the corner from our home, the Texaco station, which was owned or managed by a guy named Herbie, who was a cool guy, they always checked under the hood. I don't see that too often nowadays. They checked the battery, they checked the oil, they washed your windows, you got free air from that air pump. I don't recall them charging for it. And they had a thing called Texaco road maps. They were great. We used to fill up the glove compartment with these maps of every state. They were free. You walk in, there'll be a big display of road maps. You take whatever you want. There was no GPS. There was no internet. There was no on-track. Basically, you were on your own with a map. Or if you were lucky enough to join AAA, you could get one of those famous trip planners with their page-by-page detailed analysis and review of where to turn left and right and what roadside things to see along the way of your journey. It was a different time. Where was your favorite vacation, and where did you get lost? I used to get lost all the time, but I enjoy getting lost. I would drive home from college and just pull off a side road and just see where it took me without a map and just find out where it ended up. Obviously, I made it. It's years later, and I'm here. But what's your most famous place where you got lost at? Think back. The memory's yours, and they're great. Well, that was a short bit of music. I promise we'll get more later on. As we were doing our walk, we crossed a big street, and we went in front of the first house on the end of the block. And my friend Steve lived there. In fact, I had 3 friends named Steve on this block. But this Steve was a scientist. And we looked at the house, and we all shared stories of who lived there. I had the most memories because I knew most of the people. They had 10 kids, maybe 11 kids. But I knew most of them, and I was very, very bonded friends with Steve, the scientist. Steve convinced me, our other friend Steve, to build a fort clubhouse in his backyard. He convinced his dad that we should do it together, so we all got together with wood, and the other friend Steve was really good at carpentry. So we built this wonderful fort in the back of his house, in the back of his garage. It was like a lean-to, if you know what they was. Lean-to from the old Lassie days with Lassie TV show. They had lean-tos. We built this lean-to behind his garage. It was a really cool clubhouse with a trapdoor on top. We'd go in there, we could sit there, and we could play our baseball cards, read magazines, and just sit around and just talk and bring my transistor radio. The only thing was we had a problem with ventilation. It was really hot back then. Nobody had air conditioning, obviously, especially not in this little clubhouse. And our trap door got stuck once in the heat of a summer day. We were sweltering hot in this little room, probably about 8 feet by 3 feet wide. Finally, we crashed through, and we were forbidden to ever go in there again. I think his dad took it down piece by piece. But did you ever actually build a treehouse like the Swiss Family Robinsons? You know what they say, it's never too late. Start building.
Oh, I've been so lucky and I've been so blessed. In spite of my failings, I've found success. For I've known love and I've known good times, and I have known friendship and written some rhymes.
You've been listening to The Last Walk, Remember When, with your host, Ron Baumbach. We've been going back in time to the fun times, the places from our lives. Hope you enjoyed the journey. We're going to do it again next week, so come on.